Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fielka. Today is May 11, 2022. We want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast, I'm Probably Wrong About Everything. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with Agustín Fuentes. Is that the correct way to pronunciate that?
Jerry, that is perfect. Absolutely perfect. Thank you.
Dude, you are looking good in an Anthony Burgess t-shirt. He wrote 8 books about James Joyce. So I'm really impressed. Where are you calling in from?
So I'm in just outside of Princeton, New Jersey. I'm in a sort of a town called Skillman outside of there, about 12 minutes from the campus and downtown Princeton.
How cool is that? The first question is, what's the best thing for a human being?
Wow. So the easy answer is this: other human beings.
Well, there's no right or wrong answers to any of these questions, but right off the bat, you hit a home run. That's the correct answer. I got it from Wilhelm Reich. And I mean, the variations are amazing, but that's a great, easy answer. What's your favorite form of information? How it comes into you?
I'm going to cheat and give 2 answers that I'm going to entangle here because I think it's really important that I think the most important and most human mode of information exchange is the answer to my first question: between people, between other
Yeah.
humans, talking, engaging, what have you.
Yeah.
But to be honest, I have a deep, unabiding love for books. And
Yeah.
so while information is so wonderful in the sort of in-person or via digital engagement, the transmission between one and another, reading a book for me, or reading an article or a paper or a manuscript or a thesis, there's something for me that's still magical about the written word.
Yep. Printed word. We love it. And so just to divert, did you pick up reading because your parents were telling you to read, an example, or on your own?
So I was read to from before I can even remember, by my parents. Both of them. They were separate pretty early on in my life. But reading was just a central thing. So not only was I read to as a child, I remember very, very clearly some of my first memories are being read to, but also from a very young age, I was given books,
Right.
as not just as presents, but basically just as like, oh, here's something interesting.
Yeah.
So I used to, even as a teenager, for me, sometimes an amazing Sunday would be sitting down with 3 books and just plowing through them.
How cool. So why do humans collect or gather information?
Because it's the currency by which we make meaning in the world, right? Information is how we navigate. We build up these things called schemata, right? The way in which we perceive or experience or interpret the world. And that's actually built up throughout our entire lives by absorbing information and analyzing it. So we
Yeah.
like build up our worlds via information.
Is this need or want to collect information
Oops.
more innate or more invented? Okay, you froze up there. Did you get the question?
No, I missed. It cut
Yeah,
out
you
there for a second.
I froze. You froze for a second, and maybe I did. Is this need or want to collect information more innate or more invented?
See, I'm antagonistic towards the nature, nurture, innate, invented thing. I think it's always a mess of the two. So I would say that to be human is to want information, but to be a cultural being is to create ways to get that and manipulate and use that information.
Really good. There's a few of these either or questions, and I throw the word more in there. So you handled that well, because a woman a couple months ago said, the word more doesn't function in your question. and then this young college student, we were going round robin with one of these questions, and somebody says, well, it's both. And she goes, that's a cop out. Because people want you to
Yeah.
commit. And I'm not asking you to commit. I'm asking you to help me invent new questions and reword my questions. You know, do thoughts create emotions?
Sure. Yeah. Thoughts create emotions and emotions create thoughts, right? Thoughts create emotions because they're, in talking about information, they sort of sift through or roll through our bodies, our minds, our brains, our hormone system, the endocrine systems. And they, in that moving through, they generate responses, and those responses are emotions.
I don't know what I think until I fill in the blank.
I don't know what I think until I've had some time to think about it.
Time. That's beautiful. Yeah, I got it from McLuhan. I don't know what I think until I say it. Joan
Right.
Didion says, I don't know what I think until I write it.
Right, right.
So it's,
Well, it's like McLuhan also said, "I wouldn't have seen it if I hadn't believed it."
well, I know I saw that in your paper. And that's something we're going to get into. That's really good. So can humans think without language?
Yeah. Yes, we can. Absolutely.
Chomsky says that a language is not just words. It's a culture, a tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. What do you
Yeah.
do when language breaks down? When language doesn't work, what do you do?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, language is always part of us, right? Whether or not you're able to speak. There's sign languages, a variety of different things. But let's say language totally breaks down, and you're in this position where you can't use language at all. Emotion, intent, sort of expression. Um, there's a wide variety of ways. Touch, demonstration. There's tons of ways humans have to communicate. In fact, even when we're talking to one another, I mean, particularly in person, it's harder in two dimensions. But when we're talking to one another, a good chunk of our overall communication is not from the semantic expression. It is from the whole sort of thing.
Yeah. The whole thing, would you call that body language?
Yeah, well, I would call that communication, right? Because it's body language, it's semantic language, it's positionality, it's sort of the emotive context, and it's experience all brought together. So, I mean, the short is body language, but body language is more than me waving my hands.
Yeah. But I'm saying when language breaks down, say with your student or
Right.
your loved ones, what do you do? What's your strategy?
And try to figure out how to do a good primate thing, right? Like monkeys, apes, they don't have language, but we share in common with them this incredible ability to convey information socially. So, touch,
Touch, yeah.
demonstrative, what have you. Touch is a good one, sort of, acting stuff out, trying to convey meanings in some ways,
I like touch.
crying or yelling, those also work.
Oh, crying and yelling, that's good. You're going the whole gamut. That's good because this guy said about a couple months ago, I says, "What do you do when language breaks down?" He goes, "Group hug."
Hey, I mean, that's a good option, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
well, that goes along with
yeah,
touch. In fact, great filmmaker, I said, "What's your favorite form of information?" And he said, "Human touch."
yeah, yeah.
People don't think human touch is information.
Oh, yes, it is,
It
man.
is, but I mean, in general,
Yeah.
they usually go, books or, like what so of course, it's both, and it depends. Your observations of humans, are we more thinking beings or more feeling beings?
I mean, yeah, that's a hard one to say, and I wouldn't even say it's both, right? Because I'm not sure that thinking and feeling are separate in the way most people
Yeah.
think they
Yeah.
are, right?
Mm.
This classic Cartesian approach to mind body, it's just
Yeah,
wrong. It's just not
it's
true.
wrong. You're right that it's wrong. But the thing is, the phenomenon I like to say is you can't separate feeling from thought, um, head from heart, but we can because we invented the word. So we
Right,
think we
right,
can. We
right.
think we can separate them because we invented the words.
That's
Yeah.
exactly right. We can trick ourselves literally into sensing that distinction, because we're really good at that.
Yeah. It's like, your t-shirt guy, Anthony Burgess learned from Finnegan's Wake. social engineering.
Yeah,
You can socially engineer yourself
right, right.
besides other people. Okay, two Alan Turing questions from 1950. Is thinking a function of the soul?
Ah, that's a great question. Turing was a fascinating guy. I'm actually going to go out and say no, because I think soul is too difficult of a concept. Is thinking a function of being human? Yes.
Yes.
And I don't
Very
mean I think, therefore I am. I mean I am human, therefore I think.
wow. So that's your flip of that quote?
Yep.
Dude, this is, this is a key thing I'm after. We could drop quotes till the cows come home, me and you all
Right.
day. The point is to reinvent the quote,
Right.
reword it. I
Right.
to me, I love the epiphany we can get from condensing something, but you flipping that was great. The second Turing questions, can machines think?
Yes.
Dude, I love your certainty. You're smart too. That's why they got you teaching at Princeton.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, I love that question too, because the answer is yes. But how do they think? Why do they think? That's a really interesting question.
Yeah,
And my punchline that's really interesting here is they think because we tell them to.
exactly. Yeah. It's really good. See, it's about reinventing a question. Do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
Meaning gives me happiness.
Yeah. But what you pursue meaning more?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, does the brain more detect consciousness or create consciousness? Is consciousness there bubbling away and we're detecting it? I love it. You're like George Carlin's daughter. Every question she would crack up, then she'd take a deep breath. So is consciousness there bubbling away and we're detecting it, or are we actually creating it?
Yes.
Very good. What's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
Light.
Wow. You c
Now, here's
Yeah.
something really interesting. That's for humans. I would argue that for a lot of other species who think a lot and do all sorts of stuff, they think much more quickly than we do. Humans have too much going on in our minds, so we actually get all clouded. Our thought processes are nowhere near as quick as many other species.
But when you say other species, you're saying like a dolphin thinks?
Oh yeah, of course they think.
But aren't you
No, no,
anthropomorphizing the
no, they
word?
don't. I'm not saying the dolphin thinks like us, but I'm saying all anything with a brain thinks. They may not think human thoughts, but they do think, and they know how to see the world, categorize, and do something with that.
Right, but still, yeah, it's interesting. Okay, Audre Lorde, the poet, said, "You can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools." Yvonne Rainer said, "You can if you expose the tools." What
Mm,
new tool do you suggest? Let me put it in context really fast. When I say new tool, I just mean what tool do you gravitate towards? You can apply the quotes to the question if you want. You don't have to. All the questions you put in the context you want.
yeah, no, I love that Audre Lorde quote, and I just came across it the other day in some research and reading, and the twist on it I think is very important. So yeah, it's an old tool that I would use, but in a new way, right?
Yeah,
That is, the tool is knowledge,
yeah.
but the trick is new modes of distribution and deployment of that knowledge. And here, there's this giant debate about social media and the web and all these different ways of getting stuff out there. I would argue that getting stuff out there and then doing something with it is can be done differently than it used to be.
Yeah. It's really good, man. You are smart. You're a wordsmith. So, what do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
Right now, oh man, yeah, we don't have enough. You got 3 weeks. I'll give you the rundown. Um, uh, I worry about. Oh, here's a good one. I worry right now in the world. Right here we are, May 11th, 2022, as you mentioned. Right now, I worry that my optimism for the world and for humanity in particular is not as well grounded as I think it is.
Wow, not as well grounded. In meaning personally or everybody else or both?
No, personally, I mean, oh no,
Oh,
yeah,
no,
my
no.
optimism for everyone else. But I'm optimistic because I study, the last couple million years of human evolution. I study human
Yeah,
behavior. I study our place in relation to the world and climate and ecologies and all that. And over time, I'm like, well, look, we have incredible capacities. But right now, like what keeps me up at night is, yeah, so we have all that. I know all this stuff, but have we like moved past the tipping point?
yeah. Yeah, I never ask this question anymore, but I go, is it used to be I used to ask it, is human progress more cyclical or more cumulative? And, the answer is, well, it's like a cone and it goes
Yeah, yeah,
it
yeah,
goes
yeah,
down and
exactly.
up. But,
Right.
um,
Yeah.
McLuhan learned from Ezra Pound that the artists are the antenna of the race. I mean, artists mean
Yeah.
anthropologists, book writers, you know what I mean, filmmakers, everybody. They're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions so that we can cope with what we don't like about them. You
Mm.
know, so I asked the question McLuhan probed his whole career with. Why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
If you by we you mean sort of the contemporary society that you and I both live in, it's because we've
I'm saying,
overcommitted.
yeah, I don't want to sound
I,
elitist. We can go, well, me and you
no,
are
no, no, no,
artists. Yeah, but
I'm
yeah,
saying
I
like
mean,
let's say the U.S. or U.S. and Canada, right? Talk about McLuhan with this
well,
whole thing. So
I'm saying humans in general. Why do humans in general? Yeah, but you
I
can
don't know if
again,
humans in general do that, but I think
yeah,
I would say our society writ large, or
okay,
this sort of contemporary, because of an overinvestment in a particular kind of capitalism and a
yeah,
particular kind of societal structures and expectations
yeah,
that has wrenched us out of the recognition of that key critical
yeah,
thing. I would argue in many places I've been in the world, particularly smaller scale societies, are ones that are not so heavily vested in the total like love of a particular capitalist context, or sort of neoclassic economics.
yeah,
I see different engagements with artists and the arts in the way you've described it. We've created a situation where there's this negative feeling, sense, reality around anything that is not productive, right? In a
yeah,
profit sense.
yeah. No, it's great answer. Perfect. Okay. Do artists have moral obligation?
Yes.
Whoa. Are you more afraid of are you more afraid of old ideas or more afraid of new ideas?
I'm not afraid of ideas.
Beautiful. Can you conjure up your earliest memory ever or one of them?
So we were talking about being read to. One of my earliest memories, and I have no idea what my age here, could be three, four, five. I really start remembering things around 4, 5, or 6 best. But my mother reading to us in a house in Santa Barbara, California. So I must have been at least 5, maybe 4.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it had to be 5. Um, and that was my mother. I can picture the room, picture nighttime. She used to come in and play guitar. She would play a song or something for us and then read. And she was reading to us from the book, and I'm forgetting the author, but it's called The 13 Clocks. It's a
Yeah.
fantastic, fantastic book.
Wow. Beautiful. Is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
Oy, more blessing. More, I'm going to go with blessing, even though it's a complicated question.
Did you go oi? Did you go oi?
Yes.
That was good. Tell me someone, please, within your immediate family, then outside your immediate family, just briefly, who was like a role model and had an impact on you, and what specifically was that impact?
Well, I mean, there's so many examples within my family
Well, just give me like 1 or 2
yeah,
briefly.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I will really quickly, but I'm going to give you the one that sort of
Yeah.
is most current right now, and that's my partner, Davy Snidely, who you'll actually be talking to pretty soon.
Right.
Um, Her capacity for wordsmithing and for thinking through the magic of language has helped me in not only as a scholar and as a writer, but also just as a way of seeing where I've loved words my entire life. I've loved text. I've loved these things. But it wasn't until I met her and we started sort of a journey together that I found not a new love, but a new possibility for loving words.
Wow. How many years you been together?
Ooh, 28,
28 years. But when you
maybe
say partner, you're not married.
29, maybe
Okay.
29 at the end of this year, I think, maybe
But
something
when you
like that.
say partner, you're married or you just say partner or you are
No,
married?
actually, we are married. We got married because we needed health cover. We lived together for many
Yeah.
years before we got married,
Right.
but then there was an issue with health insurance, and it was turned out to be so much cheaper to be married than not married.
Okay. How do you explain your longevity? 29 years with one person's pretty long.
We get on really well. We
Get
also
on
we
really.
before COVID too. We traveled a lot and lived in multiple places, so maybe that's part of it. But no, we just hit it off really, really well.
Yeah. It's beautiful. So outside your immediate
Oh,
family.
outside. Oh man, there's just so many to choose from. Um, okay, this is, I don't know why this came to mind. This is totally off the wall, but I was hearing an interview earlier a few days ago, and it just reminded me. Um, the comedian Robin Williams,
Oh, yeah.
for all of its ups and downs and what have you, I found to be, I was in love with him. I was so impressed with him, because of his incredible capacity to channel emotion, sensation, humor, and I don't know, verve. I was in awe of his capacity to turn on and to make everyone feel.
Yeah.
And
Really
so
good.
then
Yeah.
he was a great, not just a performer, but he knew something deep about humanity. And actually, if I can cheat here and add one more person, the
Sure.
flip side of that and an intellectual sort of influence on me is Oliver Sacks,
Oh, yeah.
um, whose writing showed me how science can be the most imaginative, enjoyable, joyous, creative thing.
Dude, you really are fun. Yeah, I love this because I got to give you two anecdotes really fast. Oliver Sacks used to take LSD in Venice Beach right here. And I have a question out of what you said, but back to Robin Williams. My friend Rick Overton's a great comedian. Robin stole one of his jokes and he says, "Dude, you stole my joke." Robin whipped out his checkbook and wrote a check for $5,000 and said, "Here." I
Nice.
mean, essentially, you can't copyright jokes, but just to do that was
Yeah.
just the kind of
Yeah.
gesture. And you said this thing about capitalism. The thing
Yeah.
is we live in a capitalistic
Yeah.
society,
Yeah.
and then Frank Zappa said it so well. He says, "I'm a devout capitalist." And he didn't seem like it. He seemed like a guy devoted to his music, not to
Yeah.
money.
Yeah. Yeah. Zappa had a. Yeah, I guess
But
in that term, I'm a lapsed capitalist.
a lapsed capitalist. I like that. But let's just go on that one thing, Oliver Sacks. What's the difference between science and art? Because you said seeing science and joy, people want to see. Robin was joy and comedy. That's art. What's the
Yeah.
difference between science and art?
Uh, where you're standing.
Wow. What's that?
So in my book from about 5 years ago, The Creative Spark, I wrote a whole chapter on science and a chapter on art, sort of in human evolution and how these things emerge, trying to make the case that look, these are two sides of the same coin. Like you
Yeah.
can't; these are not different kinds of things, right? If you've ever done, I mean, I've been, you know, in a lab with DNA extracting stuff and counting stuff. I've been out in the field staring at monkeys. I've been, high in the mountains of New Guinea, hanging out eating sweet potatoes, trying to figure out how people live on such this kind of particular food and learning from them. Each one of those cases, what I think was the same kind of resonance as someone painting an amazing picture or doing a carving or a performance art. I think there's a we divide science and art in a way that's unfortunate and damaging.
Yes. It's
The
good.
creative, the creative spark, the creative process is central to both.
Both. Yeah. Did your parents raise you a particular religion?
No, well, I mean, a devout atheist is not sort of,
About
but
atheist.
no, but so here's what's really interesting. I mean, just in a nutshell. So my mother was born, in a Jewish family from New York. Sort of left Judaism and more or less converted, not officially, but structurally to Catholicism. My dad is from, Spain, a heavily Catholic context, but, he was a child of the Civil War, and his parents and he were sort of radically atheist. And I, my whole life, have been extremely interested in religion. So I was very interested in my grandmother's devout Catholicism in Spain, and my grandmother and grandfather's Judaism and Seders and temple and stuff like that in New York, here in the US. And so I have these experiences of Catholicism and Judaism, which I find these culturally magnificent, fascinating, deep realities. I myself am not participant in any particular faith tradition, but I study them, I respect them, and I
Yes.
work with, I do a lot of work actually with theologians and seminarians, rabbis, to think through the relationship between science and religion, because I think that's really important.
Beautiful. And so do you pray?
No,
If God
but
exists,
wait. But I
sure.
but I do hope.
You do hope. That's good. If God exists, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
I'm going to avoid the question of which God are we talking about here, because then it would radically change the question. But should there be some force in the afterlife that says something to me after I die? Um, that's a great question. What would you like to do?
Nice. What would you like to do? That is a beautiful question. I like that. Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
Evil people exist.
Wow. This is a follow-up. How do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? And I'm going to set up with a few modern thinkers' thoughts. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
Hmm.
Coppola stole from the mob and the samurais. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK says, forgive your enemy, but don't forget. And I need an enemy. It's a lot of thoughts. The basic question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you respond to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
I actually like Alan Watts, and when I was a teenager, I was very influenced, right, reading a few of the books. But I disagree,
Yeah.
because I think acknowledging conflict is very important, and
Yeah.
acknowledging the the pieces of that conflict are very important. So I would say, yeah, you need to not only acknowledge your enemy, but you need to know your enemy. Now, what that means, I think, can be varied, but I would say acknowledge and know your enemies, um, and then co-opting the other statements. Bring some of them close and push others far away.
Wow, that was good. You're a listener too, but it's really a pleasure. So, but yeah, Ram Dass said, I'm having a real hard time loving George Bush, like fill in the blank, Putin or whoever. But American Indians, indigenous say your enemy's your best teacher.
Yeah.
So that's
Well, I mean, you learn from, it's frequently easier to learn from failure than it is from success. So
yeah.
conflict and hardship, friction, right? Anna Singh, the anthropologist, talks about friction as like this necessary mode
Yeah.
of understanding.
So we follow Maria Gambudis a little through Rian Eisler, who says, partnership rather than dominator society. And also McLuhan saying violence is humans' quest for identity. Christian Murty said the exact same thing, almost in certain words. Is violence innate or invented in humans? Do humans have, yeah.
So you're talking to someone who's written extensively on this. So I'm going to
Yeah.
cop out here and say both, man.
Both,
It
yeah,
is totally both.
yeah. But I'm saying, okay, then how do we keep if it's in us innately,
Hmm.
but
So
and it's
the The both is a better answer though, because
Yeah,
what do you mean by, like, violence isn't one thing. There's all
yeah,
sorts of
right,
different
right, right,
violences, right?
right.
And so here's where I think is really important. Like, is the capacity to be cruel and violent and aggressive part of being human? Yes. How those things play out that's a whole different story.
But I mean, in your field, is Maria Gimbutas chalked off as not too valid, or
No,
some
no.
answer?
I mean, it's old, but I mean, I think it's important. What we see now is there's a huge array of scholars that say, hey, look, 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 look. This whole idea of, like, nature, red tooth and claw, which is Tennyson, not Darwin, which most people get wrong. But this whole idea of this sort of intrinsic nature of violence in the world, particularly in humans, it's just not true, right? I mean, I've studied the last 2 million years of human evolution. Yes, we went around smacking each other over the heads, but you know what we did more often, more frequently, and what the data support? Compassionate care for others, for injured, for sick, for engaged. So it's not one or the other. It's always this mixture of both.
Yeah,
But compassion is as important as violence in the
yeah,
human evolutionary story. And so trying to separate those things. I mean, think about it. Like, which army wins the war? The most violent, aggressive, mean, or the ones that are most compassionate and caring for each other, that they're willing to risk their lives for one
yeah. It's like in Finnegan's Wake when the guy's ready to shoot the guy at the, and he pulls his pants down and starts taking a
another.
shit, and he goes, "I can't shoot you
Yeah,
while you're shitting."
yeah.
But how do we stop our governments from going to war?
Oh man, if I knew that, I'd be much more optimistic about the future. Um, dude, I mean, stop electing idiots.
That's good.
I, I mean, I don't know what else to say. I mean, there are hundreds of millions of people, for example, in the United States, and apparently we can't all, even a small percentage of us can't really come together to make a difference for good right now.
Yeah. Stop electing idiots. I like that. Okay, Utah Phillips said anarchy is making rules for yourself and not other people. Who's entitled to make the rules?
Being human means living in a group, right? So their groups always have some rules, like them or dislike them. So who's entitled to make the rules? That depends on the group, and how we do it. I don't think I am not a libertarian. I think that part of living in society means understanding that there's going to be rules of society. Not that I always agree with them or follow them, but I don't know if that's even an answer, but that's as close as I
Yeah.
can get.
Yeah, no, it's difficult. And then how do you follow it's coming up right in the Wall Street Journal the other day, false fears.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
this is a big one too. Um, Actually, I'll read this quote from John Basil Barnhill, the socialist. Where the people fear the government, you have tyranny. Where the government fears the people, you have liberty. Then V for Vendetta in 2005,
yeah.
the movie paraphrased it. People should not be afraid of their governments. Governments should be afraid of their people. So
Right,
then we have false fears like the
right.
war on drugs. And the guy worked for the US government. He says, you can't have a war on drugs because drugs don't fight.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
you can't say no to drugs because
yeah,
drugs don't talk.
yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah.
how do you personally handle false fears?
Well, first thing I got to say is that I encourage you, if you haven't read it, to read the graphic novel V for Vendetta as opposed to the movie. The graphic
Okay.
novel is a lot better. Um,
Okay.
so false fears, I think, are one of our biggest problems in contemporary society. And I think rather than, I mean, false fears are a great way to describe them, but I would say it's information manipulation with the intention of control.
Yeah.
And fear is one of the best ways to do that, right? So everything, all those things you just described, and many more. Right now we're seeing it all over the place, this use of fears, of unpredictability, of instability. It's I handle them by getting more information, but not everyone has that luxury or even that capacity.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing what you said because if McLuhan calls Joyce a social engineer because he wrote a book.
Right.
He used his imagination, wrote a book. He's comes out of the symbolist. The symbolists are like Mallarmé saying, Don't paint the thing itself, paint the effect it produces.
Mm.
Now this is where Mallarmé got it, was from an American, Edgar Allan Poe.
Oh, wow.
Poe
Ah,
Poe was the biggest influence on the symbolist. It
mm,
doesn't matter what you say, it's
right,
how it makes you feel.
right,
So,
right,
this is why, Bob Dylan and Jim Morrison and Patti Smith and Kurt Cobain, they're all symbolist wannabes.
right, right.
And so, what's the difference between the social engineer, uh, being an artist, a poet, and the whatever you want to call these info manipulators with the intention of control? I mean,
Yeah.
they basically, the control is, I want you to buy my record or buy my book. They're just not literally going, I'm an artist and I'm going to create something.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would love to hear you suss that out.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no, I think that's a great point. But I would say there's a lot of artists who, of course, want you to buy their stuff or to support it in some way. But I don't know if that's what causes them to do that art, right? So, for example, Patti Smith's music, or I mean, her book, Just Kids. Um, yeah, of course she wrote that. And she knew she was going to make money. But man, it's a good book, and there's stuff in there that gives me great joy, and being with it was incredible. I was lucky enough. Davey and I were lucky enough to be in Querétaro in Mexico at the Hay Festival. I was giving a talk or whatever, and Patti Smith was there doing a show, and we were staying in the same hotel and whatever. And to see her, this was only 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, to see her sing in a pouring rain in this sort of horrible storm, where almost no one could, like, everyone stayed there, whatever. And she easily could have just said no, but she sang, right, with a one guitar accompaniment, and it was just very impressive. And
Yeah.
she did it not because she had been paid to do it, I think, but because it was the thing that she wanted to do. And I think that's very common. But your point is well taken, that I think a lot of people use manipulation of whatever type for particular financial or control ends. And I would argue that, like, I hate, maybe that's a strong word, but I really dislike most reality TV, because it's this intentional misrepresentation for control and manipulation of the worst kind, right? And
Yeah.
it's created this notion of, no, 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 this is the world. I'm like, no, this is all BS. It's scripted, it's controlled, it's structured, and it's delivered to you to create a sensation and a belief system that is absolutely incorrect.
Yeah, and Steve Bannon used to sell Michael Moore's VHS
Yep.
tapes, and he studied McLuhan, and is he doing anything different? But
Yep.
anyways, I love to, this is a sort of a cheap shot, so you don't have to answer. But then Patti Smith, about 2 or 3 months ago, was on a full page ad in the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times selling luggage.
Oh
So
God, I'm so glad I didn't see that.
but you know what? I surveyed 20, 30 friends, and they're all no punk sensibility. And 95% of them said, oh, maybe she needs the money.
No,
Oh, maybe she's giving the money to a good cause.
no,
A couple people went, that's horrible.
no. That my response is, that's horrible. And I really respect Patti Smith and really
Wow.
like her stuff,
That's,
but it's totally horrible, man.
yeah.
No, there's some things. No, it was one thing if she was. I mean, there's many things you could shill for, that you could make money
Yes.
at, that don't, but luggage,
That is
and
good, man.
like, I'll have to say, it's about the. I think you said Wall Street Urinal earlier, which I love
Yes.
that phrase. So, I mean, I have so many issues, but I was lucky enough to have a very snarky and pretty obnoxious review of one of my books in there, but actually it got read a ton and got a bunch of interest, and so I was like, huh, I think
Dude,
this is really interesting. I almost
that
want them to be mad at me, because that's actually a good thing.
Well, 2 things. That's John Cage. It doesn't matter what your critics say, it's how thick your press kit is.
Right, right.
And dude, secondly, the writers in the Wall Street Journal, the economists, that they're great
Yeah,
writers. I'm
they are.
sorry
You're
to
right.
say they're great writers. So if you get a review, you're lucky,
Right.
and it doesn't matter if it's good or bad. It's
Mm.
exposure.
Although recently, and this is a total aside, but the Wall Street Journal recently has a bunch of op-eds by awful writers. and by people who are actually jokes.
Yeah.
It's really interesting because they lean so into the cancel culture thing. They have all these right-wing nut jobs who got basically
Yeah.
kicked out of academia for being lame, who are now, writing
Yeah.
op-eds, and they're just not good writers, which is
Yeah. No,
unfortunate because they had this tradition, right? Disagree or not with Wall Street Journal, and the Economist has great writers.
right. But it is this what I propagate by saying that, oh, that's great writing. It doesn't mean they do have shitty
Right,
writing sometimes,
right.
but in general, and Michael Moore said it great once. He said the Wall Street Journal is the enemy's tip sheet.
Yeah.
Okay, so James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin over 100 years ago. He basically checked out. He said, "This is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree?" Years later, Faulkner said, "Sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism. Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?"
Because the art of the narrative, the art of representation can sometimes be, to paraphrase what you just said, more real than the thing itself.
Yeah.
Life itself is something we're immersed in, and we don't have the luxury of looking at it and thinking about it, right? It's a different delivery system, and it's sometimes better. I assign students in, like, evolution courses, biology courses, and sort of complex courses. I'm like, here, everyone has to read, Candide by Voltaire. And they're like, what? Why am I reading Candide? I'm like, read it, and then you'll understand how that relates to the way in which hypotheses are constructed, the way in statistics are used, the way in which we model human evolution expectations. It's a great, narrative
Yeah.
to teach with, because it lets me get at all these things in a better way than I could by throwing a bunch of numbers or graphs or charts up.
That's beautiful. It's like one of the great experimental filmmakers, James Benning. He requires his students to go hang out in the lobby of a police station. It's like,
Nice.
"What? I'm a filmmaker." No,
Yeah.
go watch what happens in the lobby.
That's great.
Isn't that's pretty heavy.
Yeah.
So, walk us through just briefly how you're going along in your life and what's the tipping point where you go, "I'm going to study anthropology and I'm going to be a teacher. I'm going to be a teacher and an author." Just basically the tipping points.
So, I mean, the real tipping point for anthropology, for all of that, were two things. One was I was actually taking a class. I had lots of majors in undergrad. They basically had to kick me out of Berkeley at some point, because I just didn't want to graduate. I figured, what's the point? I could just take classes and be a student. So it was some point in my second year, actually. It was fairly early on, when I took this class from the scholar, the woman who would eventually become my graduate advisor, right, to do my PhD with many years later. Her name is Phyllis Dolinow. She's still in the Bay Area. A great anthropologist and primatologist. And I took her primate behavior class, and I'm sitting in the class the first day. 125, 150 students or whatever. We're sitting there. She's this very small, very forceful woman up in the front of the stage, and she's sort of talking about what we're going to talk about in primates. And she's talking about, well, there's this chimp and this langur monkey and this other monkey, and she starts using the pronoun she to refer to all of them. And I'm like, wait, what's going on? And in that moment, here I was, 20, 21 years old. I recognized, wait, I've never heard a professor or a teacher or anyone refer to use the she as the general pronoun when referring to other things that I don't know if male or female, or when they're not human. And I was like, this is interesting. And then within 2 classes, I was like, oh, I love this stuff. And then at the same time, I was taking another anthropology class, just because friends were taking anthropology. I didn't really know what it was. And it was this incredible class about sort of social, cultural anthropology and sort of different societies and whatever. But it was done through film, largely, because the specialist, the person who taught it, was about film. And we ended up spending a week seeing this really incredible Soviet era film on the Altai people, in sort of southern Siberia. And I was just like, wait a minute, for a living, you can talk about female chimpanzees and study, groups in the southern Siberia. This is a thing. So I got very excited. Yeah.
That's
It was
good.
about a year and a half later, I walked into Phyllis Delano's office, and it's my third or fourth year as an undergraduate. And I'm like, Professor Delano, I think I know what I want to do with my life. I want to be an anthropologist. And
Wow,
that was
that
it.
is you really summarized it well. And I have to interject one thing. You ever see the movie by Louis Buñuel from the 20s called Land Without Bread?
Tierra sin pan. Las Urdes is the name of it. Las Urdes, Tierra sin
Right.
pan. So, a little surprising fact here: my father, Victor Fuentes, who's a retired professor from University of California, Santa Barbara, is one of the world's leading experts on Buñuel. I grew up from a young age watching every Buñuel movie multiple times, reading his critique of them. And in fact, my father's book, Buñuel en Mexico, about Buñuel's Mexican time, is one of the most famous analyses of Buñuel. And in fact, my father was one of the last people to interview Buñuel, hanging out with him in his house in Mexico, and talking and drinking tequila, and just really reflecting on things. So yeah, no, from Buñuel is one of my earliest memories. In Tierra sin
That
pan.
is amazing. Can I interview your dad?
I mean, we can ask him, sure.
Oh God, that is amazing. Yeah, because that's like fake anthropology, but it's not
But
really a
that's the point of it, right? It
but
was a
it's not
critique of the
really fake.
fascist sort of structure, and
Yeah.
yeah,
It's not really fake, and it's beyond the essay film
yeah.
because they call it an essay film, but it's a fake, fake, fake. It's more than essay
Well,
films are like
it's a
triple.
political statement. It's a
Yeah.
radical political act.
Yeah. No, I've got something really important to ask your dad because is the goat falling off the edge of
Oh,
the cliff, did Louis fake that so that the critics will go, he just had the puff of smoke and then they die, they go, he could have faked that.
yeah,
Louis, he probably didn't. And the other question
yeah.
I'm dying to ask your dad is, did Louis show up at the screenings of his films with pebbles in his pocket, stones in his pocket, to help start the riot or to protect or to protect himself against the rioters when they go, here's
Yeah.
the filmmaker, throw rocks at him. And one guy said, no, Louis Buñuel just had stones in his pocket. That's it.
He's an amazing. The whole surrealist movement is
Yeah.
fantastic, and Luis Buñuel is just. I have to say, what is it called in English? Entre tinieblas. I'm forgetting the English name of the film where the whole group, a wedding party, is sort of stuck
Yeah,
and they can't leave the.
yeah, I can't think of it either, but I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's an amazing film, and they shoot
yeah,
that shot, and it's the Last Supper
yeah.
shot. And then she flips. Oh, okay, that was a great diver. So, a screenwriting teacher told me on to film is that a great film or great art is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Kubrick says the opposite. Great film is when you clearly not see the intention of the maker. What role does intention play when you're writing your books?
Yeah, that's really difficult. When you talk with Davy, she'll have a much better answer about the film part of this. So I'll just avoid that. My intention in writing the books is to engage, entertain, inform, and transform the reader.
Yeah,
I write with intent. I mean, I intentionally, frame and structure. I try to, as I think all authors do, convey something of meaning, of matter. Um,
yeah,
so yeah, I think I don't mind if they know my intent, but the ideal outcome is someone reads one of my books and gets something out of it and ends seeing the world slightly differently.
yeah. Then Duchamp said there's no art without an audience. How much are you thinking of your reader while you're writing your book?
So it is really interesting. I think of the reader a lot when I'm putting together the proposal and the outline and the frame and structure. Then I frequently forget about the reader to my own detriment while I'm writing sometimes because I'm just like, oh, this is great. I get so caught up in it. And then the copy editors or the revising is when I go back to thinking about the reader again.
They sort of force you, you mean?
Yeah, well, I think you want to think about the reader. You want to do all that,
But
but
you
when I,
mean they want you want them to help force you
yeah,
into thinking about the
yeah.
reader. Yeah.
Again, it's when I revise, but when I'm, really in the midst of working on the page, when I'm in the midst of creating, I'm with the data, with the knowledge, with the narrative, with the story,
Right.
fully. And I can sometimes, that's one of my problems with writing, is it becomes largely about this incredible journey or narrative that's in my head.
Yeah.
And sometimes you got to sort of work with that so that it's accessible and entertaining to people.
It's beautiful. But would you consider why we believe pop anthropology or academic anthropology or both? Where do you
So,
put it?
so I get critiqued about being pop all the time, but I would say if you read Why We Believe, you will see it's very well referenced, incredibly intellectually rigorous, and it's all there. But I tried to write it in a way that at least the reader who's interested in these topics can access it.
Yeah,
And I've been critiqued for that by a lot of my academic colleagues. Oh, it's too, but why do all this work, do years, decades of research to come up with these ideas and write them in a way that like 8 other people can understand? I don't get
exactly. Yeah. No, that's beautiful. That you can extend. So back to your writing utensil, whether it's the pen or the keyboard, McLuhan says everything we invent extends some humanness. He
that.
calls it a human sensorium. So clothing extends our skin, knife and fork extends our teeth.
Yeah,
Religion or philosophy might extend consciousness, whatever. What does the writing utensil extend for you? What humanness?
my mind.
Yeah.
So, and that's McLuhan took that from Gregory Bateson, the anthropologist,
Oh yeah.
right?
Yeah. That's
That this sort of notion, steps to an ecology of mind. I mean, this whole
yeah.
idea of the extension of the body, and actually, he even took that from Gibson, right? Not William Gibson, but the other Gibson, the
The
neuro. Hmm?
issue his first name spelled Itien.
Something
No,
like that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. The
he's a Catholic.
Wait,
Gibson.
who?
Anyway, yeah.
Yeah,
We'll look it
Gibson.
up.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
but Bateson is someone we study a lot. That's heavy. Yeah.
Yeah,
Because
Gregory Bateson's fantastic, man.
yeah.
It just, and it's again, is one of these incredible figures in anthropology, but also at the time, sort of popular figures that have just been wiped from like contemporary discourse. And it's like, what you don't forget really good contributions.
Yeah.
Things fall out of favor, and it's unfortunate.
Yeah. His daughter made a doc on him, and
Mm,
it's not great, but you just seeing him and just collaborating his information, it's mind-blowing. But it is interesting, because I'm curious of your just why we believe for a second, as the word lie is in the word believe,
yeah,
and seeing is believing was flipped. It could have been
yeah,
the reviews of your book a few years ago. They go, no, it's no longer seeing is believing. Believing is seeing. You
yeah,
believe in what you already know. In fact, Igor Stravinsky said most people don't know what they like what they know.
yeah, yeah,
So, I mean, in human terms, just again, not academic, not highbrow, the common everyday human, why do we believe it? In a few words, what did you conclude, because you did a lot of research?
yeah. So belief. Think about this. Belief is this capacity that humans have, right? Well, let me back up just really quickly. So one of these amazing capacities that humans have is to look at the world, to see how it is, right? To see the material of the world, to see what we can touch and feel and grasp, and then to imagine wholly new possibilities and at least try to make them a reality, right? That's an incredible capacity. And we do that in part through belief. And belief is this capacity to draw on our own experiences, on our cultures, our ideas, our knowledges, what we're taught, to put all that together, to mix it up with imagination, and to come up with an idea or a possibility or a hope or a dream, and then to commit to that thing, which is not, it could be something totally intangible that we can't touch or feel, but we can commit to it so wholly and fully that it becomes our reality. It's what religion is, it's what economics are, it's what a lot of political systems are. It's this capacity for humans to commit wholly and fully. It's Wittgenstein, who someone, I'm trying to remember the author, it's in the book, I'm blanking at the moment, who sort of engages Wittgenstein and argues that believing is like being in love, right?
Yeah.
And that's our capacity to commit wholly and fully. And we can do that to things that are not tangible, that cannot be seen or felt or demonstrated, but nonetheless are.
Yeah. It's really good because we say this thing in studying Finnegan's Wake that Finnegan's Wake invented metaverse or TikTok and disguised it as a book. It doesn't matter. Every new technology fits in the formula. It does. He invented Zoom,
Yeah.
in disguise as a book because you have to read it out loud with a group of people. But McLuhan broke the code by doing a Manipian satirized translation of the Wake and said, "We dream awake." And he said, "Artists dream awake." And I'm curious if this is close to what you were just talking about. Everybody has these creative imagination powers that they utilize when they're sleeping. Some people do it while they're awake, so they're dreaming awake. Is that similar to what you were talking
about? It's very similar, but all kids do it.
Yeah.
And then we repress it as you grow up. We like people try to claw it out of themselves. And artists, creative folks who are given that opportunity, it's not just dreaming, it's the full coherent, awake living of it. We just, I would say we all do it, but then we force it just into dreams for many of us. And that's awful. Like what a horrible thing to do.
It's awful. We also talk about value judgments. That's what I like about you is suspended judgment. This is the thing McLuhan preaches. Suspended judgment is understanding is not having a point of view. So you get the big picture. But when you're in your lonely teenage room, you can go, I hate Facebook or I love Facebook. When you're with one or more people, you try to avoid value judgment so you can get the big picture.
Yeah. Although we never avoid value judgments, man. Come on, we're all biased. That's part of being human. But,
well, that's what I was. No,
but hanging out with other people forces you to actually explain your bias. That's the.
But I love that because here's the funny thing, because McLuhan was a charlatan or chalked off as a charlatan. And it's great that you even quoted him once and you go, the great thing is you go, he didn't really say that. It's great that I said, I Googled your name and McLuhan. It was like, whoop, right there. And I was like, good, he mentioned it. But he said the vanishing point in art, they did that. That's when point of view started. Which bias did okay, let's go to this. What was the motive of the cave artist?
Ooh, that's great. So actually I've written with a colleague of mine, Mark Kissel, on meaning making in human evolution a lot, and I've written about that in books and done a lot of, and I'm still doing some research on it. And I will tell you, in about 6 months probably, some papers are going to drop. They're going to be picked up by the popular press because I'm part of a team that's working on the most amazing, incredible, earth-shattering. I might be. It might be a little
good. That's good.
Here, but we're going to report on something that I can't talk about yet. That's going to challenge our basic assumptions of what it means to be human. In this context of art and creativity. So we'll get to that. But I mean, here's the point. We don't know what this initial art meant to people. Without being there, without a time machine, we cannot know. But what we can know is that it meant something to them, that they created these things in consistent patterns that evoke from us emotional, visual, perceptual responses. And they did it again and again and again. So, and their systems are the same as our systems. We know that. So we know they were intentionally doing things that evoked meaningful response. We just don't know why or what it meant specifically for them. We can guess, but without a time machine, we can't ever know.
That's great because everybody goes, well, they wanted to put the picture up so that they could teach them how to go get that animal. Or, my favorite answer was, what's the motive of the cave artist? This guy goes, to keep people in the cave.
Yeah, but good. That's as good as any. Although, what's amazing is if you've gone into some of these places, I've been in some of these places. I mean, I was one in Portugal where you had to like go in and crawl on your belly and scrape along on your back. I had a flashlight and a headlamp, but you have to imagine this with like an oil fat lamp wandering through 50, 60, 70 feet underground and then spend all this time painting. No. This was not some superficial thing. This was really serious. What it meant, though, if I was around, well, this was about a 24,000-year-old cave. If I was around 24,000 years ago and be like, hey, Augustine, why don't you crawl down into this cave, risk life and limb and like paint for a week this stuff that no one will ever really see. I'm like, no, it's okay. You guys go ahead and do it.
That's why Herzog's film's pretty good,
Yeah,
Cave Forgotten
yeah,
Dreams, and he based it on a New Yorker article that said, hey, the cave artists invented like 5 things: scaffolding,
yeah,
spray paint, like blowing, and it's so, and in their life, they could live till they were 15 then, and
yeah.
so it was basically who invented art? Teenage taggers.
So, so there's been 3 or 4 studies, and there's one recently that's out of all those handprints. Those
Yeah.
handprints is a really common early cave art. The majority of handprints are women and teenagers and kids.
Wow, that's good. Kids and women, yeah. Okay, so what's more important, conviction or compromise?
That's a hard one, but I'm going to go with conviction.
Wow, okay.
Not
You've been
that compromise isn't important, but you can't do a good compromise if you don't have conviction.
Yeah. You've accomplished a lot. Rate these 3 elements: luck, skill, and ambition. What played the biggest role, second and third?
Well, because I study sort of inequity and structures and all these kinds of things, luck was the top one, right? Wait, what was the other 2? Ambition and skill.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, it's got to be luck, ambition, and then skill.
Very good. So I spoke with Michael Apted about 40 years ago, and I asked him, why do rock video editors feel so obliged to edit fast? He said, because he says, because we've learned to take in information faster. Most people don't know Abel Gance invented rapid montage in 1922, and then it flourished in the 80s. And Marty Scorsese even says, I cut my films faster because of MTV. And I asked it with a bias, can humans actually learn to take in information faster, or are we just brainwashed to believe we can?
Well, first, ask Davey this question because she was an editor and has
Yeah.
done a bunch of stuff, and there's some
Oh, go
really
ahead.
interesting stuff from that context. But so, I mean, we can actually take information incredibly quickly. We always have been able to. Hundreds of thousands of years ago, before any video or anything like that, we
Right.
could. The difference is, trends and patterns become familiar and we become attuned to them. So it's not that we're able now to take in information faster, it's that it's become technologically possible to do that stuff and profitable in some way, or it's been a cultural trend, right? The 80s music videos and then the like sort of fast cuts of the 90s and the hyper jump cuts of the 2000s, that was not necessary. That was technologically possible and became culturally profitable in some way. I don't think it reflects anything about the human brain or visual system.
Yeah, but let me ask this first, and then I want to go back to that. Is it literally possible to multitask?
Yes.
Wow. So back to that, um, isn't everything just the same as back then? The way you just described it. So what? We got climate change. We always have had
No,
problems.
no, no,
You
no,
think
no.
things are worse? Well, how isn't that making this overall big
So
value judgment?
no, not, I mean, statistically structure the data. So let's look at climate change. So let's just take the last couple, let's take the last 8 decades where we've got very, very good data. We have good data for thousands of years from ice cores and what have you. And we know that the pace and pattern and dynamism, right, is the sort of flopping around of climate change and the warming is different from anything we've seen in the last about 270,000 years. So I'm going to say, I'm going to go out on a
Yeah,
limb and say, well, that's sort of, the data basically say we're in a time of serious climate change.
right.
So that's one thing. What was the other example I used? Climate change. Oh, another great example is look, people are like, there's always been inequality and wealth and what have you. The level of inequality between the sort of top 1% and the bottom, let's say
Yeah,
60% of the planet, is more now than it ever has been in any point of human history, recorded or pre-recorded.
yeah,
So there's nothing like it. And in fact, in the early 1900s, the 20s or whatever, when we got this huge explosion in inequality, for example, in the United States, it was nothing compared to what it is today, right? It was not even 1/10 of what it is today in the
right.
sense of the richest and the poorest. So, I mean, those are data driven analytics that say stuff is different now. You could
Right.
say, oh, well, there's always been problems. Yeah, there's always been problems, but not these ones.
Right. And you articulate it so well, but it's the way humans collect data and the way we consume data and who's giving us that data. And then it is our we've advanced to know how to cope with these. So
Have we?
very good question. Very good answer. Because
Yeah.
I mean, with me and you are fine. We're living.
Yeah.
We're
Right. Right, but the intensity of suffering and the radical decline in species across the planet and the radical changes in global temperatures. That's the thing. Everyone has made this whole thing. So I'm saying it's really bad, but it doesn't have to be. We can change it. We have the technology, we have the cultural know-how. We can change these things. That's really important. But what I'm saying is everyone thinks that like they've been watching too many movies. We all think that the catastrophe happens and like everyone gets wiped out except for 10%,
yeah,
or there's all
yeah,
this giant. No, it's slow and horrible. That's how change happens. Like evolutionary change, serious change actually usually isn't catastrophic in the sense of a year or a decade or even 100 years. Like slow change is centuries or even thousands of years of horrendous, unbelievable suffering.
yeah,
That's the problem with a lot of these, people like, oh, we're all going to go extinct. No, we're not. No, we're not.
yeah.
Humans are not going to. There's 8 billion humans now. Another 100 years, it'll be 14 billion humans, and a higher percentage of us will live horrible, awful, short, suffering lives. That's not
Right.
good.
No, and it's good. It's good again how you're articulating it. And you says, I don't pray, I hope. I like
Yeah,
that. And so you it appears to be you're an optimist.
yeah, I am.
Yeah. And it's
But
so
based on data, not just like willy
right,
nilly. I mean,
right.
I'm an optimist because I've been looking at 2 million years of human evolution, and I'm like, we have the capacity. I am hedging on my optimism because we're really screwing stuff up in novel ways now.
Yeah. But there is that I'm not sure. I think Dunbar talks about that, or you can tell me the roots of we only need 150 people. Why do we have
No,
go
no,
ahead?
Rob. So I like Robin a lot. Robin Dunbar is a great
I
guy. I
figured
really
you
like his work. The 150 number is just wrong. That is
is it
not the
wrong?
case. No, no. It totally, there isn't a fixed number. It depends on the society, the dynamics, the connections, what we have, and what the genesis of what Robin Dunbar was saying is like, look, there's a limit onto how many deep connections and memory sets we can have. But what that limit is and how that plays out is highly variable.
Yeah,
Um,
that was good. Okay, why is it so here's a great one to follow all that up with. Why is it so difficult for humans to consider the possibility that life may be pointless? I'm not saying life is
yeah,
pointless.
no, no, no. That's
Saying, why is it so hard for us to consider the possibility that it might be pointless?
Well, because people don't read enough Camus, Sartre, and Beauvoir.
Because they don't read enough Camus, Sartre, and who was the third one?
Beauvoir, Simone de Beauvoir.
Oh, there you go. You are really did
So,
you
so I mean, think about it. It's very possible that life is pointless, but the incredible thing about being humans is we can create meaning.
yeah. Yeah, I look forward to your big revelation here. So, is perception reality?
Yes.
Wow. T.S. Eliot said poetry's outing your inner dialogue. What language is your inner dialogue in?
I don't know. It depends on my mood and my state, right? Sometimes my inner dialogue is I mean is you know what's his name who wrote Do Andrew Philip K. Dick, right?
Oh,
Other
yeah.
times my inner dialogue is Camarón de la Isla, right? One of the most amazing flamenco singers from Spain. Other times my inner dialogue is a Star Trek episode. So I, I don't know.
That's good. No, that's actually my favorite. You know how I constantly repeat? Well, someone said 2 weeks ago, one of my favorite answers is great experimental filmmaker in New York. And I says, "What language is your inner dialogue?" And she goes, "I wish I knew."
I'm there. I'm there.
I like the Philip K. Dick though. That is good.
Well, it just
So
there's something about, do
yeah,
androids dreams of electric sheep? Not the I love Blade Runner and all that stuff, but
yeah,
the actual short story, I mean, a
yeah.
novel. There's something about this confusion, this sort of,
Oh no.
where what's going. There's something powerful about that I really like. Yeah, it's funny too. And I was rereading Heinlein's "Stranger in a Strange Land" again recently because I loved it and it really shaped me so much. But rereading it again, I'm like, oh, I knew some points in my life that was my inner voice, and I think that was a problem.
That's funny because you track, it's like Salinger or any of that. You track
Yeah,
back. I went
right.
through my notes to figure out where I found McLuhan in my college, and Alan Watts was there, and I was like, I don't remember reading Alan Watts in college, you
Yeah.
know. But so two film people, their mantras are ignore yourself. There's no self-expression. Cecil Taylor, the great jazz pianist, says, I'm just a vehicle and this stuff just comes through me. I know
Mm.
it's both, it depends, a stupid question, but is art making, anthropology studies, whatever you want to call it, is it more self-expression or more you're a vehicle for whatever technology, culture, or environments are present?
I think the best art is when you're a fantastic vehicle for your interpretation of all those things.
Right. Can art making be egoless?
I can't imagine how.
Wow. Lewis Carroll says, I believe as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. Have you believed in any impossible things lately?
Well, Lewis Carroll wrote, "'Twas brillig in the slithy toves, did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the borogroves, and the mom rats outgabe." If you can write that and that can happen before breakfast, then yeah, I can't. But yeah, I would like to think multiple impossible things happen at any time.
But I mean, tell me one thing you believe that's impossible, that lately you've believed that, because it's going back to your word,
Yeah,
why we did.
yeah,
You believed in it, but it's an impossible thing.
yeah. So I hesitate on some mornings. I wake up and I feel it's impossible to get out of this crap shoot context dumpster fire that we are in. And that's never happened to me. I've always had optimism about that. So I would say that's one of the things. But back to the Jabberwocky bit
Yeah.
that I just quoted there. I think sometimes the impossibilities are nonsense and they flit away.
Yeah. But that was interesting. Did you get that before you said that, the thing you said just before that, did you get that more from the way your parents raised you or on your own?
I have no idea. How would I
Where
possibly know that?
where you got it from?
Where I got what? Jabberwocky?
The
No.
this sort of this well, that more it's like your optimism.
Oh, yeah. I
That
mean, I got that. I mean, I think the combination of, I mean, if you were just to walk through my life, you could see incredible reasons for my optimism, but also there are many things you'd be say, oh my God, how could this person possibly be optimistic? So
right.
I don't know. I don't think there's one reason for it. I
Yeah,
would
I
say
know
the
what I'm saying.
current
Yeah.
instantiation of it, is the fact that I've spent the last 2.5 decades, almost 3 decades, studying how humans work,
Yeah.
and that's what gives me a lot of optimism.
That gives you optimism. Yeah, yeah, that's good. Yeah, because Sunra said, "The impossible attracts me because everything possible has been done and the world didn't change."
Oh man, I'm a huge fan of Sun Ra, and
Isn't
that
that an ama
that
and that
quote,
was
I'm gonna look up that quote and put it on my
oh,
wall.
dude, yeah, well, guess what? He's gone mainstream, and it's like, I hate when people like that go mainstream,
He
and
has? What is he?
well, it was in a two-page article in the New Yorker recently. It's like
Mm,
they gave him a picture and a two-page article. To me, that doesn't mean he's gone mainstream, but he's always quoted in every Afrofuturism article.
right,
They have
right.
Sun
Of
Ra
course. Yeah,
quoted.
yeah.
It's amazing to think he did that, or what he did, and then he lectured at Berkeley. Did you know
Yeah,
that?
yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah. And then he said, I got to go on tour. So they fired him. They said, you didn't finish out like Sunrod fired from Berkeley. That is a great,
Yeah,
you know,
that's
that,
awesome, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
But it is like, just tell me one major element in your 30 years pursuit of this study that's changed and one major element that stayed the same.
I think one thing that's really changed is, as a student, particularly a young student, a young scholar, I really thought I had a good grasp on, the basic framework, the basic way evolution works, the basic way biology works, the basic way things work. And the more I've learned, it's that old trite phrase, the more I've learned, the more I've realized how much more I need to know.
Yeah.
I really had to retrain myself to understand that many of these assumptions were very reductionistic and essentialist, and they don't fit the data. So
Wow.
that really, I mean, if I look at what I would believed at 26 as opposed to now at 56, you know, eh, I radically changed in my understanding. So I have a much better understanding, a much more fine-tuned notion of how things work, and yet I recognize that we know less in the big picture than I thought we did. So that security of knowledge has changed. Um, Now, the thing that hasn't changed was that pretty early on, I would call what I thought were, you know, arrogant, ridiculous assumptions about, moral and ethical, like these things that just human beings should be doing, and this is the way things go. And actually, I haven't changed that much. I hope I'm not as arrogant as I was, but the idea about community, compassion, complexity and creativity as these central features of being human is something I've always thought and been committed to. And the more I learn, the more committed to that I am.
Amazing. Because the first one is, see, I hear you say these things and I believe you. I goes, he's an expert. He knows. And you talk with certainty, but it's almost like the thing that changed is that there is a security in knowledge, but you're willing to know that there's you're willing to change or learn more.
Dude, there's so much I don't know, right? And like I thought by the time I was in my mid 30s, I thought I had really great understanding
Yeah.
about physiology and social behavior. Like how does the body correlate to behavior? How do these things work?
Yeah.
Now I know 20 times as much as I knew then. And I recognize that I know actually less about some of the stuff I'm really interested in.
Well, that fits into this perfectly. Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength rather than we're taught to overcome a weakness.
Yep. Yep.
Tell me a weakness you turned into a strength.
Well, this is going to sound obnoxious, but a key weakness that I had was an inability to shut up and listen. So I just wanted to learn and scrape information and talk about it. I couldn't. I went too quickly, right? My weakness was I was like, ooh, that. I just grabbed something and ran with it immediately, right? And ran to the next place. And I kept grabbing things and accumulating them. And so what I realized is I turned that into a skill of the capacity to skim across wide arenas and pick
Yeah.
out salient things and then go back and deal with them in depth. So I got really good at surveying knowledge very broadly, finding the bits that I'm really interested in, and then knowing that now that I've done the survey, instead of moving on, I need to go back and spend some time with each of these points that really turn me on.
Yeah, it's almost like it they talk about power browsing.
Yeah,
Like, oh,
yeah,
it's power browsing's horrible. I says, no, it's not. I mean, it's just different. But two things you said really about Bob Dylan, because I do this too. I tell motor mouth, and you find some kid, younger person, and they love it. They go, ah, blah, 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 and then I Bob Dylan said, don't ever tell anyone everything you know.
yeah.
He learned that from the Bible, and I'm like, when I find someone who wants to listen, I want to tell them everything.
Right.
But what you I'm curious your idea on this is TSA, tactile situational awareness. And
Hmm.
this is what I learned from Bob Dobbs, which I feel is really essential, that kids now, or younger people like your students, they can watch Facebook, cell phone, talk on the blah, 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 and they're not identifying with one particular.
Right.
So a TSA is when you're a bomber in an airplane and your plane gets hit. You don't have time to study the gauges anymore.
Right.
You have to make, so they're not identifying with particular, like we identified, oh, the transistor radio or the
Right.
VHS tape, or we identified. So they're sort of navigating the bigger picture in a, I don't know if it's a better way, but any thoughts on that,
In a
TSA?
structurally different way. So if you look at this sort of, there's this part of our brain, the outside of our brain, that runs sort of from ear to ear, right? If
Yeah,
you look at this thing, it's called the motor cortex. And that's where a lot of the nerves for our hands and mouth, you've seen that map of the body across the
yeah,
brain, right? So if you were to take me, for example, I cannot, I have a phone, but I can't do the thumb thing, right? I peck at it with my fingertips. But if you look at someone who's 20 right now, who grew up what we call native digital thumb texting, right? Who grew up their entire lives, if you like wire up their brain and my brain, you will see that different neuronal structures, different areas, the map of our body looks different. Their thumbs are huge, my thumbs are teeny on the map of the
wow.
brain.
So the
That's the way
two,
brains work.
yeah, go ahead.
So,
I'm
so,
sorry.
so, so what really is going on here is that they're differentially doing. It's not that they're different kinds of humans or different things, but they, as we develop, as we mature, our bodies become encultured. Right? That's the way it
And
works. And so, culture. My colleagues Daniel Lendy and Greg Downey, two the originators of what's called neuroanthropology, have this great sort of series of studies that show, look, neuroanthropology makes culture and lived experience literal. It's part of our bodies. And
wow.
so their capacity to it's not really multitask, but to live in multiple information streams, right, is laid down from very early. I can't do that, right? But um, I can, because of my own training and background, I can hold simultaneously complex statistical analyses, sort of mathematical sort of assessments, a broad theoretical frame that's rolling down things, and some thoughts about, my impression on a particular, Netflix show that I can actually hold all those things simultaneously. It's not the same, but I'm just saying we all have these capacities. It's just what the specifics are depends on our context and our development.
Yeah, so amazing what you said, because McLuhan said that Joyce satirized information overload with
Mm,
Finnegan's Wake. And that's a good thing because we live in information overload, and he satirized it. And this is what led him to being able to reword aphorisms like Churchill said, "We shape our buildings, then they shape us."
right.
And McLuhan said, "We shape our tools, then they shape us," which you just
Yeah.
explained.
Yep.
But on the album, John Simon produced a Marshall McLuhan album. The dude produced like Janis Joplin and all these people. It's an amazing album. DJ Spooky remade it and all that. He says, if you listen really closely, he goes, "We shape our tools, then they ape us."
Oh, I like that. I
Change the
love that.
word. So,
I love that.
that's the Android meme. The Android meme, as explained by
Right.
Bob Dobbs, is that once we invent something, it has hidden psychic effects. We start imitating the hidden psychic effects
Yeah.
and we disappear.
Yeah.
That's like we're not even here anymore. That's Deepak Chopra saying, "Man, we're just hallucinations. We're not here." Okay, I asked for 90 minutes. We got 7 more minutes if we do
Okay.
90. So you're okay with that?
Totally.
End end in 7. Okay. This has really been fun. I really appreciate it. So how do you find peace of mind?
I find it in a number of different ways. One of the most important ways is hanging out with my partner, Davy Snively, and Shelly, our dog, and just being, right.
Yeah,
And I think, and that's this incredible human capacity to just be with others. That's the
yeah,
most important thing. Um,
yeah,
but another really important for me, and this is what I try to tell people, is everyone needs something, right, that they
Yeah.
do that's creative and engaged. And for me, for much of the last many decades, 3 decades, 2 decades at least, has been cooking. I love to cook.
Oh,
I love the sort of art of creation in the
yeah.
kitchen. And so I would say being with others and some creative action is probably what helps everyone. The
Yeah.
problem is, in our contemporary society, I don't know that everyone has the ability to do both of those things on a regular basis.
Yeah. Culinary art, man, that's important because it goes along with eating together.
Totally. Yeah. No, breaking bread, I mean, in how many societies is the shared meal like the center of reality?
If you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
Hang in there.
Beautiful. Can you forget to die?
No,
Which way should toilet paper come off the roll, over or under?
over.
Why?
To me, it makes physics sense, and it just has a feng shui to it that is appealing.
Feng shui, that's good. 5 Alan Watts questions just off the top of your head in a few words. Who started it all?
Us.
Are we going to make it?
I hope so.
Where do we put it?
Where it matters.
Who's cleaning it up?
Unfortunately, probably not us.
Is it serious?
Sometimes.
Beautiful. Tell me something good you never had and you never want.
Wow. The first thing that came to mind is obnoxious, so I'm not going to say that. Something good. Oh, I know. It all.
It all. That was good. If you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck and someone threw a bag of shit at your face, what would you do?
If I was in that situation at that point, if I wasn't able to laugh, it would be really, really bad.
That's good. I would like that answer. Thornton Wilder said, art is confession. Art is the secret told, but art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. Agustín, you've laid your cards on the table for 90 minutes. I'm really grateful. And I'm not insinuating you haven't already answered, but really all about.
Oops. Repeat that. You cut out for a moment.
What's it really all about for you?
I mean, if you really cut to the chase, for me, it's all about understanding, making a difference, and trying to help.
Yeah.
I know that sounds obnoxious in many ways, but
No,
I just, at the end of the day, looking back, if I can say I've done some aspect of those three things, then it's worth it.
yeah. What's the cultural shift you see developing today that inspires you?
The move to the move towards the request for justice. I don't think we're moving towards justice yet, but I think more people are asking for it. And I think that's important.
But what about Richard Pryor saying just us in the word just? I mean, what do you do about that?
No, I actually I disagree. I think there is ways to assess justice. Well,
Yeah.
put it this way: the move to request equity, not
Yeah.
equality, but
Yeah.
equity.
Equity. Yeah.
Yeah, then maybe that's better than justice. Equity, right? Because
Yeah.
just us is the problem. You're right. Richard Pryor was awesome.
Yeah. Anger can be a productive emotion when fill in the blank.
When you're so pissed off that you have to do things.
That's good. Well, it's truly been enlightening. I'm going to end with one question I want to tell you. I want you to be my best friend. You're my hero. You're really great at teaching me, and I really appreciate this. What gives you the most optimism?
I'm about to be 56 years old. Of those 56 years, I've spent at least some part of, not every year, but the majority of those years traveling around, meeting different people, interacting with them in different languages, in different places, different times, of different ages. And it's really that, the fact that I've been lucky enough and privileged enough to see a lot of the world and a lot of different kinds of people, that makes me very optimistic, because I think humans are pretty amazing despite all the crap we do. And having seen a whole bunch of different successful ways to be human, I'm pretty optimistic about the future.
It's really beautiful. Bingo on the 90-minute point. Let's do it again and on a particular theme, like one of your
I,
books.
I'd
When
be
you're
glad. I'd be glad to do that. Absolutely.
when
No,
you're
this was really, really fun. And also, um, there's a joy in the questions that you ask, because it's very rare that we get the opportunity in any format to range across literature, science, art, music. I mean, that's what we should be doing, right?
yeah, it's really been fun. You really got it. Thank you so much, sir. Namaste, and I'm gonna hit the end button now, but I don't want this to ever end.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.